Welcome to Tips for Making Your Content Accessible. If you were just to do a search on the web for accessibility, you would find pages and pages and pages of information. You'd also hear terms such as American with Disabilities Act, World Wide Web Consortium,
Optical Character Reader, Web Accessibility Initiative, User Agent Accessibility Guidelines,
Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, Job Access to Speech.
Whew! Just lots and lots and lots of information, so much that it is totally overwhelming to most folks. So you end up being confused about what should I do? What do I need to do to make things accessible? So what we're going to do is take all this information, the tons and tons and tons of information out there, and try to break it down into the 5 most important things. We'll call them the 5 low-hanging fruit of accessibility. It's the 5 most important things that if you cover these topics, you'll be well on your way to having everything accessible. So what are these 5 low-hanging fruits? We'll talk about color and fonts. We'll look at image alt text. We'll look at how to create proper links. We'll look at the options for captioning videos. And we'll look at the options for creating screen-readable text. Okay, let's look at colors and fonts. One thing you don't want to do when using color is to use color as the only way of designating information. Think about someone who may be colorblind. Both red and green to someone who's fully colorblind, both of those colors end up being kind of a muddy brown. So they would look at this table, they could see these squares, but would not have an idea of which one's an increase and which one's a decrease. They would both look the same. So rather than just using color, you can still use color, but also use something else that indicates the difference in the information. For example, here, we've still got red and green, but we're using pluses and minuses for an increase and decrease in the population. So someone can look at the symbols and still tell the differences in the information. Another use of color would be to remember not to use color again as the only way of distinguishing information. For example, here it says memorize the text in red for the exam next week. Someone who maybe cannot tell red or has a problem with seeing different colors would notice that as all being just black. Someone who happened to be using a screen reader, maybe they're visually impaired or totally blind, they wouldn't be seeing this as red text and black text. A screen reader would just be reading all of it as just text. They wouldn't know what part was the piece they needed to memorize. Again, you can still use color so that those who are visual can pick it out very easily. But by putting that text in bold, a screen reader is going to make mention of the fact that that is bold, and therefore someone using a screen reader will be able to quickly tell what's the bold text. Here's some other examples of, in this case, bad color choices. We know during the holidays everyone likes to use red and green for all their decorations and stuff. It may be great for decorations on your house, but on the screen, red and green really have a tendency to vibrate. And as this symbol in the middle shows, sometimes it can actually create movement when there really isn't any, depending on your color choices. So this is definitely not what you would want to do when putting together different colors. Now let's look at image alternative text, or alt text as we commonly refer to it. Alt text is the information that someone would put into a document, PowerPoint presentation, PDF, that gives someone using a screen reader all the information that's required to understand the information being provided by an image. Let's say, for example, you paste an image of the Lewis and Clark expedition into a slide. Someone who's visual can quickly see what that is, get the information, they're good to go. Someone who was visually impaired would not be able to see this image, and instead would rely on their screen reader to tell them there's an image and read the description for that image. Now in this case, the description for this image comes over as being the address or the URL for that image where it was found on the website. If we're using a screen reader, of course we're not seeing the image, the screen reader reads this text. And this is what this would sound like.
Picture http://shelly.mesa.k12.co./staff/computer lab/images/w_clark_map.jpg.
So not only is it a very long URL, the screen reader even sounds like it's run out of breath, it's so long. So rather than just leaving that as the default of whatever it is that gets put into the description when you copy it from a website, it's better to go in and modify the alt text, put in a title for the image, and change the description to something that makes more sense to someone that's just using a screen reader. So now it sounds like this.
Picture map showing Lewis and Clark's expedition from St. Louis, Missouri to Fort Clatsop on the Pacific coast.
So now it makes a lot more sense to someone who's using a screen reader, but a person who's visual has the image and everything is fine. Now here's another example of something you might do in PowerPoint. This is not a typical slide. This is actually an animated slide that shows the process of how a light switch works. Someone who's visual sees, okay, we got on and off. I'll click on on, has the electrical line get charged and turns on the light bulb. Then I can click on off, turns it off, I can run it again. Now, since this is not a typical slide, when a screen reader gets to this slide, it doesn't do anything. It'll either describe the boxes that are on here as image 1, image 2, image 3, or it won't say anything at all. So what you have to do in this case is to make sure that you have a description in here that is descriptive enough to describe to someone that is using a screen reader what this image is about. And this is what this one has as far as the description goes.
Slide 11, light switch animation and dash cutaway diagram of a basic light switch box. Flipping the switch to on makes a connection between the positive and negative electrical wires. This movement completes the circuit, thereby sending electricity through the wires and lighting up the light bulb. Flipping the switch to off cuts the circuit and the light goes out.
Now you may have noticed that the screen reader was reading text that visually you can't see on this screen. Now here's how this was done. I'm going to exit out of PowerPoint and I'm going to switch my view over to outline view. This is another way to check and make sure that you have what is necessary for a screen reader to pick up and read information about the slides. Screen reader typically reads the title for a slide as describing what that slide's about. Notice that most of these slides just have a short little piece of text that basically is the title for the slide. In case of this light switch animation, the title is much longer because I decided to put the information that I wanted the screen reader to read right there in the title of the slide. Now you'll notice that on the slide, you don't see that text. It's still there, it's just hidden. You can do this lots of different ways. How I decided to do it was I'm going to take and move this box to the back. And you'll now notice that there is the title for the slide. It's real tiny. Doesn't really matter how tiny it is. The screen reader still picks it up and reads it. It's small so that it hides behind the box. Since it's not going to be visually available anyway, doesn't matter what it looks like. So that's one way of many ways of doing this particular illustration. Okay, now I'm going to switch back to presentation mode. So now let's look at the process of creating proper links, or sometimes referred to as hyperlinks, in documents, PowerPoint presentations, and so forth. Typically, when we create a link and put it into a document or a presentation, we just find the link on a website, copy and paste it, and we're done. That works fine because when someone who's visual looks at that, they don't really try to read the link. They'll realize it's a link, they'll click on it and go to wherever it takes them to. They don't really worry about trying to read that link. But for someone using a screen reader, once again, we need to make sure that link makes sense to a screen reader. You want to include what that link will show, where that link will take the viewer, and how the viewer is going to be taken there. So by providing this information in the actual link itself, the screen reader is going to read that information, and the person using the screen reader is going to have a lot more information about what that link's going to do and where they're going to be taken. For example, here's the address to the Moodle instructor manual. This is the actual link itself, hasn't been modified, so a screen reader is going to read this thing character for character.
http://www.distance-learning/documentation/Moodle_ins_manual.pdf.
While certainly that link works, a person that's using a screen reader is going to have a hard time understanding exactly what it's taking you to. I mean, they probably heard the word PDF and they go, okay, well, it's at least going to be some kind of PDF. But just taking a few minutes to change that hyperlink, the text that shows up in the document can be different from the actual address itself. It doesn't have to be the same. So in this case, we made it more understandable so that it makes sense when a screen reader reads that text.
Moodle instructor manual website left parent opens a PDF in a new window right parent.
So not only does it tell the person that it's going to be taking them to the Moodle instructor manual website, it also tells the viewer that it's going to open a PDF in a new window, which is a very important piece of information. So someone who's using a screen reader is going to know they're being taken to a new window, and they'll know they need to come back to continue whatever it is they were doing. Okay, now let's look at the options for captioning videos. Sometimes you'll hear the word captions, sometimes you'll hear the word closed captions. A lot of people think that's the same thing. They're actually two different things. Captions are permanently recorded with the video. In other words, it's recorded right on the video screen and it's permanent. Closed captions are captions that can be turned on and off. Closed captions are preferable because someone who doesn't need captions can turn it off so it's not distracting. A lot of people are starting to use automated systems like YouTube for doing captioning on videos. Right now, if you load a video into YouTube, you can turn on the automatic captioning and it captions your video in real time. However, those captions are at best about 75% accurate, sometimes a lot less. Depending on the subject matter, the quality of the voice, the technical terms used, it could be practically useless, even though you have the captions in there, because they have to be modified to make good sense. Let's look at an example here. I'm going to click on this link, go to YouTube, and go to a piece of a movie called 12 Angry Men.
Not guilty. What's the matter with you?
All right, this video clip starts playing. By default, the captions are off. In other words, you see the little symbol here, CC for closed captions. I'm going to turn that on, and then I'm going to go forward to about 1 minute. So listen to the dialogue versus what the closed captions turn out to be and see how far off they actually are.
Everything, every single thing that took place in that courtroom, but I mean everything, says he's guilty. What do you think, I'm an idiot or something?
So as you can see, just with one or two pieces of dialogue and the captions are not very close. To the point of not really being able to understand exactly what they're saying if you go by just what the captions say. So that's an example of the built-in functionality in YouTube. Now you certainly have the option to make your own captions, but if it's not your video, you've got to get the permissions from the video owner in order to be able to make captions for that video and save it with the video. That may or may not be very easy to do. Another option is to use other types of software to create your own caption. There is something called the caption generator. It's actually software that runs on the website by itself. It's captiongenerator.com. We'll go to that and look at that real quick. It starts off by grabbing a couple of little clips here that you can use to add your own captions to a piece of video and make them say something actually totally different. Notice that you have the link to a video here from YouTube, and you can add a title to it, a description, and then you can start your captions. Captions basically contain two pieces of information: the actual caption, which is the text that shows up on the screen, and the timestamp codes telling the software when to show that particular caption. So this software here will help you do the timing because it will create the timing for you automatically. You just put in your captions and they'll show up in the video clip. It's a very tedious task. It's not that easy to use through a website, but certainly is an option if you have permissions to change that YouTube video. As for distance learning, we recommend that faculty use Camtasia for doing captioning of their own videos. You can certainly buy the software yourself, or if you come to the Instructor Resource Center located in Vernon White, we have Camtasia available on the 5 machines that are in that room. You're welcome to come down, create your video, bring your video, and do the captioning there. Another option that we're looking at is buying a system called Kaltura Reach. It's basically a plugin for our Kaltura video streaming system, which will automate the entire captioning process. When you upload a video into Kaltura, you'll have a button that says Caption as Video. 2 days later, your video is captioned, has closed captioning, and you have the transcript. It's going to be very, very easy to use, but it does cost some money. Basically, it's $1.65 per minute of video. Now let's look at the final section, how to create screen-readable text. Although there's lots of places you can create text, a lot of people will be using Microsoft Word. Inside Microsoft Word, to make the document readable by a screen reader, you'll need to use the headings that are built inside of a Word document. You'll, of course, have to add those by using the styles for heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and so forth. But once you put the headings in a Word document, you can check and make sure that it's functional by turning on the navigation pane, which here you see on the left-hand side. This shows the navigation and just shows you the heading levels within a document. So you can make sure that you have all the headings that you need and that they take you to the correct places within a document. You want to make sure you do that because someone who's using a screen reader, specifically JAWS, which is Job Access with Speech, is what that stands for. It's one of the more popular screen reading programs that people with visual impairment use. There's an option within JAWS to bring up a heading list within a document that they may come across. And this is what that heading list looks in the JAWS software. Allows a person to just use their cursor keys to move up and down to select which heading in a document they want to go to, and then just press the enter key and goes directly to that section of the document. The idea, if you're using a screen reader, you're probably not going to use a mouse. Therefore, all your navigation is with just a keyboard. So the ability to maneuver and navigate through a document just with a keyboard is very important. And you can see with the heading list here, it actually shows you which headings are level 1, which headings are level 2. It makes it very easy for someone to find the correct spot in a Word document. As far as PowerPoint goes, you should always, always, always use the built-in templates. If you try to start creating templates yourself and putting your own graphics in and doing backgrounds and putting your own text boxes, you're going to find yourself doing a lot of extra work. For example, this template I'm using here is something I downloaded from eLearning Brothers. It looks great, but there's like about 12 pieces of graphic for every slide. And every one of those pieces of graphics had a name like steelbg.jpg, blueshadow.jpg. When I first started working with JAWS to see whether or not this PowerPoint presentation was accessible, it was reading all this stuff and I was trying to figure out where in the heck are you getting all that information from? Because I couldn't see it. I had to go in, look at the alt text for all these pieces of graphics and determine that's what it was reading. So in hindsight, I would never start with a template like this. I would keep with something more simple. It may not look as good, but it's a lot less work in the long run. So you always want to use those built-in layouts. When you add a new slide, select one of the layouts that are available in PowerPoint. It keeps everything nice and neat on the screen and makes it very easy for screen readers to pick up on that text. Although you can get a screen reader to read the text boxes, that's the separate pieces of text you can put on the screen, it's best not to use those because then it may be confusing as to which text boxes to be read first for someone using a screen reader. So by keeping with the standard layouts, everything's going to work a whole lot better. If you're working with text in a table, now for example, this particular table, we quickly pick up on exactly what this is. We've got sunny days, partly cloudy days, mostly cloudy days, rain, thunderstorms, so forth. Someone using a screen reader, it would just say that there's a table, or it may just say there's an image depending on how you put it into your presentation. You could go in here and attach alt text to every sun, every cloud, every rain cloud, and so forth, and make this work with a screen reader. But that is a lot of extra work versus doing it with just text. Everything still has the same information, but you don't have to go in and put any alt text because everything's text already. Yeah, it doesn't quite look as visually appealing, but it is a lot easier to work with in the long run. When creating a PDF, especially for Microsoft Word, you want to make sure that you put your headings in and that those headings convert to tags in a PDF file. And that's pretty much done automatically. You also want to turn on the option to create bookmarks. So someone who is visual can see those bookmarks and navigate through your PDF very quickly. Someone who's using a screen reader are automatically going to see the tags whether or not the bookmarks are there. Another thing to keep in mind when creating PDFs, especially if you're scanning documents in, is to always make sure to use the option for OCR, which is optical character recognition. If you scan a document in as an image, it's not going to be readable by a screen reader. It's basically just a picture inside of the PDF. Using OCR, the text will stay as text, which makes it readable by a screen reader. A quick way to check to see whether or not a PDF is readable by a screen reader is displaying a PDF on the screen and seeing if you can select the text in the document. If you can, it was scanned with OCR. It should be readable by a screen reader. If you can't select the text, it's an image. That's not going to work very well. Okay, that covers the 5 low-hanging fruit. One last thing I wanted to talk about was how do you check to make sure your stuff is accessible? There's lots of ways of checking. Some ways are better than others. There is an accessibility check inside of Microsoft Office. It certainly isn't all-inclusive, but definitely gives you some idea of what you might have to change in your document. To access the accessibility checker, you would click on File, or if you're using Office 2010, File Info, and then click on Check for Issues. This is what that link looks like, and I'm going to exit out of here and show you what that looks like inside of PowerPoint. So going under File, and then looking for Check for Issues, which is right on this info page, and then clicking on that button and running the Check Accessibility option. In this case, in PowerPoint, the accessibility checker summary shows up on the right-hand side, and we see a list of things that might need to be changed in this document. I've purposely made some things inaccessible in here so you can see things showing up on this list. Not everything on here is an actual problem. For example, missing alt text. It says there's 160 instances of that issue. Now what this is showing me that there's rectangles and pictures. This is all the graphics I was talking about earlier. There's a bunch on slide 1. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on slide 2. There's other things on different slides, and on and on and on. Most of these images listed here are for just decoration. They aren't required content for getting any information out of the course. So there's really no need to put any alt text on those because it would just be, silver box, blue box, whatever. So they're not any content that's important for anyone to really use a screen reader to read. So that's what most of these are for. Some of these are where I put sound files onto a slide, but I've got buttons that have screen reader text associated with them to play those sound files, so the sound file icons themselves didn't need any alt text. So just because there's a long list of stuff doesn't necessarily mean that's wrong. It's just asking you to make sure that that is what you want. For example, here, missing slide title, slide 1. I actually have a title in this slide that's already set up. It just doesn't show up as being the official title for that slide, so that's why it's telling me that. Slide 27 is a blank slide that I put in here just to show you that there's not anything necessarily wrong with this. It's just a slide I haven't used yet. Probably want to delete this out of the presentation before I give it to someone. Unclear hyperlink text. There's one instance of that. It's where I actually use that as an example. So in this case, there's nothing wrong with it. I corrected it by putting in the correct one. So it actually will tell you when you have a bad link that hasn't been made clear. So there's lots of things here that's listed. Some of them is things that I still need to continue to work on. Some of these are nothing of any consequence. So it's certainly not a all-encompassing checker, but gives you a good idea of what you need to be looking for when making your documents and presentations accessible. All right, let's wind things up here. So I know we've covered a lot of information, but I want to leave you with just remembering those 5 basic low-hanging fruit: colors and fonts, image alt text, proper links, captioning the videos, and making screen readable text. If you cover those 5 things, you'll be well on your way to having your content accessible. As with anything in this training course, if you ever have any questions, feel free to contact Distance Learning, and we'll be glad to help you with anything you might need.